Hey everyone, Robert Ferringo back with the next team on my 2023 NFL Power Rankings countdown. We have a very special guest who we will get to in 1 minute. Actually, he's not that special. We have a very average guest. Let's say that. All right. First, if you are enjoying these videos, be sure to like and subscribe to the Doc Sports YouTube channel where you will get notified of daily free plays from some of the top betting experts in the country, including this guy standing next to me, Nolan Patrick of Strike Point Sports. Nolan, thank you very much for joining us today. Are you excited for football?
I am. It's my pleasure. Glad to be here. Very excited.
Okay, we're talking New York Giants, and I thought who better to have on than a lifelong New York Giants fan. I knew you were going to do that, by the way. Just throw all objectivity out the window here. Okay, I already had the jokes ready that you're going to wear your footy pajamas like you do every Sunday when you watch them. Now, you and I, our fandoms with our teams, our relationships with our teams are very, very different. I'm a Bears fan, and I hate the Bears. Like, no one hates the Bears as much as I do, and they've been my team since I was 6 years old. You're a Giants fan, and you and the rest of our Giants fan friends are like the most positive, irrational, like you guys just love the Giants. Like coming into every year, you're fully expecting them to win the Super Bowl. And maybe that's because they have, rewarded you for that optimism in the past, but after seeing what you saw last year and heading into this season, is that optimism warranted, or are you still just being a Homer Giants fan?
It's tough. Last year did kind of rejuvenate the fandom, so to speak, because we actually had something to cheer for. The fact that they went to the playoffs and they beat Minnesota in that wild card game, it gave us something to cheer for. So we finally sounded like we were making some sense after what seemed like winning 12 games in 10 years. So, I like what the Giants have done this offseason. I think that you're going to see a better product on the field than even last year. But unfortunately for us Giants fans, our schedule is brutal.
Okay, so you touched on it. Prior to last season, the Giants kind of almost under the radar. I don't feel like they got ragged on enough for how bad they had been for the past decade. They had 8 losing seasons in the 10 years prior to last season. And over I believe it was either the 4 or 5 year period prior to last season, they were tied with the Jets for the worst record in football. Like it has been pretty bleak. What do we expect from an encore? They went 9-7-1 last year. They were a surprise playoff team. They won that playoff game, as you mentioned. What do we expect from this group for an encore?
Obviously, with the Giants specific, like any team, I shouldn't say the Giants specifically, but injuries are a huge thing. Daniel Jones is coming off one of his best seasons as a quarterback for the New York Giants. And he finally, not the receivers, but he finally had a healthy Saquon Barkley. I think that goes a long way for this team. They made improvements, albeit not huge names, with guys like Paris Campbell and Jamison Crowder and Cole Beasley. So it's not like the receiving core is anything to really get excited about. But when you had you and I in their receiving room, it's considerably better than it's been. So again, I think that you're going to see a better product on the field than what you have seen. I'm just worried about the start because it is going to be such a brutal season. I'm excited about Daniel Jones. I really am. Something that a lot of people don't take into consideration is Daniel Jones is a decent quarterback when he has Saquon Barkley in the lineup. When Saquon Barkley's in the lineup, I think they've played 35 games together. Daniel Jones has thrown for nearly 8,000 yards. He has 44 touchdowns compared to only 17 interceptions, and he has a 91.4 QBR. In games without Saquon, he's got 16 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, and only a 77.3 QBR. So when Jones and Saquon are together, they're actually a pretty good team. So I am somewhat excited.
Okay, I have to push back a little bit there. So what you're saying is that as long as Daniel Jones has someone else who's much better than him that the entire defense has to focus on, then he can be competent. If left to his own devices, he's actually terrible. But as long as he's surrounded by much better players, he can actually get it done. Okay, so Daniel Jones, really interesting case, right? And for me, it all ties in with Brian Dable. And one of the things I always say about coaches, whether it's across any sport, college, pro, whatever, you can't just look at what a coach does where he goes, especially in that first season. If you want to get a true measure of a coach, you look at what happened where he left. All right. Brian Daboll was in Buffalo. He left, and Josh Allen put up huge numbers. I'm not going to say he fell apart or that it was all Daboll while he was there, but Josh Allen had his worst season. He was turning the ball over. He was kind of a mess. Any Buffalo Bills fan that watched Josh Allen last year will say, yeah, he was kind of a mess last year. Brian Daboll also comes to the Giants, and Daniel Jones all of a sudden has the best year of his career. He had been an injury-prone, turnover-prone kind of disaster his first 3 years. All of a sudden, he cleaned that up right away. How much of that is Daboll? How much of that do you feel is just Daniel Jones maturing? And do you think that they can kind of find that next level this year?
I do. I think Dable has had a great impact on Daniel Jones. One thing to also remember, though, is Daniel Jones has been a guy that's turned the football over time and time and time again, but his fumble numbers have actually gotten better with each passing year. They've gotten better over the course of the last 4 seasons. So he has improved. Again, not saying he's amazing, but he's gotten better, better, better. I think Dable is a perfect fit for Daniel Jones because you did see the development of Josh Allen, and I do think that Dable had a huge impact on Allen. One of the things you touched on it was Josh Allen and the turnovers that he made, but specifically inside the red zone. You know, Josh Allen turned the ball over constantly when the Bills got inside the red zone and lost a lot of points for that team, whereas Dable and the Giants didn't necessarily do that as much this year. They got considerably better there in that aspect of the game. And I think that now that those two are going to have another year together, and some of the additions that the Giants have made, you know, a healthy, hopefully Saquon again this season, having a guy like Darren Waller, just extra offensive weapons for Dable and company, and Jones specifically, to really improve upon last year.
Okay, Giants made a massive, massive mistake prior to last season not picking up Daniel Jones's 5th-year option. That could be a whole other separate conversation. You pick up the option, even if you don't know if he's your long-term guy. And if last year he proved that he wasn't your long-term guy, you still pick up that option because it's cost-controlled, and they could have used him this year as a bridge to whoever the long-term thing is. Didn't work out that way. They end up having to give him that massive contract. Okay. Consequently, they weren't able to give Saquon Barkley the big contract that he is looking for. You already touched on how important Barkley is, his health and his availability and his production is for that offense. He's not real happy right now. Is there kind of a dark cloud hanging over this team right now? Do you feel like there's some bad karma? I know Barkley's saying a lot of the right things, but you follow this team very closely, and you have a good finger on the pulse there. What's your sense here?
Saquon's not happy. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's not happy. He wanted a bit more stability than the Giants gave him. But way back when, the middle of last season, everyone that follows the Giants and anybody that follows football knew that the Giants had a decision to make. It was, what are you going to do with Jones and Barkley? They're both in that contract situation. And unfortunately, NFL teams always lean towards the quarterback. It's just what they do. Whether it's a fantastic quarterback or not, they invest in their quarterback, their signal caller, and not the running back. Yeah, Saquon's pissed, but I almost feel like he's going to play with a chip on his shoulder as opposed to pouting and sitting in the corner, because isn't this really another contract year for Barkley? Doesn't he eventually want to show the Giants, you know what, screw you for not signing me to a long-term deal. I'm going to play out of my mind, and then I'm going to go play somewhere else. Or not only that, I'm going to play out of my mind, and then you're going to have to pay me a ton of money. So I think that Barkley is in, let's say I hope that Barkley is in a bit more of a driver's seat than he thinks, and I think that he's going to play with more of a chip than the little baby pouting in the corner. I think he's going to have a good season.
So the front office, obviously, this was a self-inflicted wound, but Saquon can only be so angry. Also, he hasn't been healthy. He has not been healthy throughout the brunt of this contract. So there's only so much that he could say. And one thing I want to go back to Daniel Jones. I don't want to feel like I'm just ragging on him, even though he is kind of a loser. But am I crazy that when I see Daniel Jones play, when I look at the size, the arm strength, his ability to run and make plays, out of the pocket. He's not Josh Allen. He's not going to be Josh Allen. But am I crazy to see some similar traits and think that maybe under Daboll's tutelage he could develop into kind of a poor man's Josh Allen for this offense? Or is that kind of expecting too much for a guy with a more limited ceiling?
No, I definitely think Josh Allen light is just fine. I mean, you have to go, you take a look at what Josh Allen has. He's had better coaching. He's had better players. So he's been better. Is he better than Daniel Jones? No doubt about it. That would not be a conversation we would have. But he's had weapons. Geez, I would say that if Gabe Davis walked into New York Giants Stadium right now, he'd be the best wide receiver in the building. So the fact that, Josh Allen's second or third weapon would be the best by far in New York is saying something. Josh Allen has had weapons, Daniel Jones hasn't. But as far as the way they play, that tenacity that they run the football with, the cool calmness that they both do have, I could see, Josh Allen light. I think that's fine.
Don't you dare disrespect my boy Darius Slayton. That guy can play. That guy can just play. And they went out and made one of what I think was the best deals of the offseason. If we're making a top 10 best moves of the offseason, getting Darren Waller was a steal. I know he's 31 years old. I know that the production hasn't been there the last couple of years, but it's like I talk about with Derek Carr when people try and rank him or like rag on him. You don't realize just how dysfunctional a franchise, an organization, a team, in a locker room the Raiders are. Okay, so what has happened with Darren Waller the last couple of years? I'm putting that more on the Raiders than I am on Darren Waller. All the reports out of training camp is that he has been literally dominating people. You have Waller. You mentioned some of the free agent pickups that they brought in. Some of the guys that were hurt last year in the wide receiver room are healthy. They should have some passing game. Now, this could be a good or a bad thing. Obviously, Daniel Jones is going to have more of those weapons that you want him to have. But is that going to make New York kind of turn away from what was so successful last year, which was running the ball and not turning it over? If they open up the offense this year, could Daniel Jones be exposed? Could some of those turnover issues that he's had in the past come creeping back up? What do you see out of the Giants offense this year? They finished in the top half of the NFL somehow by some act of God with a, wet mop and a traffic cone starting at wide receiver. They finished number 15, I believe it was, in scoring last year. So now that they have some pieces in place, what are you expecting from this group?
I think that it's going to be similar. I do see better talent across the board on the offensive side of the football. But really, if you look at what the Giants have, the only person that has even a remote possibility to open the offense up and get down the field would be Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt runs faster than most people drive, but really all the other receivers are just a bunch of slot guys, X guys, running in and out. I think that the Giants still will have a somewhat conservative dink and dunk offense, but I think that there's just going to have a lot of other guys that can catch the football and that can move the chains and move down the field, really giving Jones and Barkley the opportunity to create the big play. I think you're going to see the big play again out of Jones and Barkley and not necessarily out of the wide receivers, but guys that are just catching 12, 13, 14-yard passes, moving the chains and being methodical up and down the field. Just because I don't see it. I don't see a guy that's going to get, a bunch of 20, 30, 40-yard receptions. Jamar Chase is not walking into the building. So the Giants are still going to have to be methodical and still going to have to take care of the football.
All right, we got to shift to the other side of the ball, and it really says something about the changing dynamic of this franchise. You're rocking the LT jersey right here, right? The Giants have been defined by defensive dominance for most of the last 30 or 40 years. Last year, they made a brilliant move and bring in Don Martindale from the Baltimore Ravens. Why wouldn't you want that guy in your building? The Ravens' defenses were fantastic while he was there. And he was able to kind of cobble together a halfway decent defense. I think a lot of people weren't prepared for what the Giants were going to do. All they do is blitz. That's all Martindale does. Like, people are coming. He's blitzing all the time. It's kind of that Pittsburgh, Baltimore 3-4 hybrid, get in and get after the quarterback type of attack. Now, they still don't have a lot of pieces on that side of the ball. They were in the 10 red zone defense last year, but they were number 25 in total, so they kind of overachieved. What are you expecting from this side of the ball now that people are going to have a little bit of more tape on who the Giants are, what they're going to do schematically? Are they going to be better than last year? Can they maintain what they did than last year, or is the dam going to burst on this side of the ball?
I don't think the dam is going to burst. I really don't. I think they're going to maintain what they did last season. I think one big thing is going to be just how difficult their schedule is. They're going to play better teams. So in comparison, I still think they're going to maintain that. The Giants gave up 21.8 points per game last season, which was 18th overall. But if you take a harder look at that, the Cowboys were 5th, and they only gave up 20.1. So the Giants were 1.7 points per game out of 5th in the NFL. Kayvon Thibodeau is going to continue to get after the quarterback. He's just an absolute beast. I love the addition, I love that Azeez Ojulari will be back. Xavier McKinney will be back. Those guys are coming back after being hurt last year. The addition of Bobby Okereke at linebacker, some people question that, the money that they gave him. I think it was 4 years, $40 million. The Giants haven't had a good linebacker in years. Gosh, who was the last good one that we talked about? Antonio Pierce, maybe? So the fact that they actually have somebody that's serviceable, or maybe even better than serviceable at the linebacker position, I think is just going to continue to allow them to get after the quarterback. Because remember, when the Giants were really, really good and they won the playoffs because of their defense and not Eli Manning, even that defense as a whole wasn't great. It was just the fact that they had guys that got after the quarterback constantly. And I think that's what you're going to see them try to maintain from last year. Statistically, they could be worse because their schedule is much more difficult. But as far as just how good are they, I think they're going to maintain what they did.
Yeah, side note, on another video that I did, I actually made a pretty big screw up, and I was listing great quarterbacks that didn't start their rookie year or didn't start game one. I accidentally threw Eli Manning's name in there, and as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, oh man, I wish I could have that one back. So, okay, is there a position group? Is there one or two guys on each side of the ball? Like what do you think is the key group for the season? Is it the receivers? Is it the offensive line? Is it their linebackers? Like, what position group do you feel like holds kind of the key to the Giants season? Kind of how they go, the rest of the team is going to go.
It unfortunately, it has to be the wide receivers. This team was 9-7-1 last year with just absolute crap at that position. So if they want to be better, if they want to win more games against tougher competition, the wide receivers are going to have to do something. Darren Waller is going to have to be an absolute monster. I think you've got to see 800 yards out of Darren Waller. I think you really do. So two positions specifically, we don't need to talk about Saquon and Daniel Jones anymore. I would say it's the wide receivers on the offensive side of the football, and I think it's the secondary on the defensive side of the football.
All right, you've mentioned this a couple of times. Their schedule is an absolute bear, and that has to be factored in when we're talking season win total over and under. They play in the NFC East, which is probably top to bottom, maybe the best division in the NFC. You could make that argument. You have two playoff caliber teams in the Eagles and Cowboys. Giants made the playoffs last year. I think the Washington Commanders are gonna be a little bit better than people realize this year. They also, the NFC East, they went from crossing over against the AFC South last year. And look, anytime you get crossover games against the AFC South, you're going to have a good season. This year, that's out. Now they're playing the AFC East, which for my money is the second best division in all of football. That's 10 tough games we're talking about right there, with a few landmines thrown in, a few letdown games and look ahead games and stuff like that thrown in. So what are your expectations here for the Giants in relation to where they are in the hierarchy of the NFC East? And do you think it's possible for them to get back to the playoffs with that schedule?
No, no, I don't. I don't think it's possible for them to get back to the playoffs. Obviously it pains me to say that. If they do, it's because Darren Waller had 1,000 yards receiving. Saquon Barkley had 1,300 yards rushing again. Daniel Jones continued to take care of the football. You know, Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas were two of the best offensive linemen in the game. Like, I think those are things that you're going to have to see. The Giants, just the fact that they open with Dallas again, go to San Francisco, play with against Seattle, go to Miami, go to Buffalo, all in the first 6 weeks of the season. That's just brutal. Having 2 games with Philly, having 2 games with Dallas, uh, it's an absolutely brutal schedule for the Giants. Season win total 7.5. I think at best the Giants go 7-10.
I think that's fair. Okay. I think I would lean on the under with this season win total as well. They're in a really weird situation, right? Because I think anyone will admit that they overachieved last year. They went 5-1 in one score games. They beat their Pythagorean wins expectation by 1.3 games. They were overachievers last season. They have a much more difficult schedule. They got some things pointing downwards, but at the same time, they're better. You look at the additions that they've made, and I feel like this is a better Giants team that probably won't end up with a better record than what they were last year. But that's the NFL. It's not just who you have; it's who you play and when you play them. So you're on the books for the under with the Giants. Season win total at 7.5. I will take the under as well. He is Nolan Patrick. I am Robert Ferringo. We are Doc Sports. Be sure to check back tomorrow for more videos as we continue to count down to the #1 team in the NFL heading into the 2023 season. Carpe diem and good luck.